This happened to me 6 years ago, and I still sleep with every light in my house on. My therapist says I have PTSD. I say I have common sense. Because once you've seen what I've seen, you never feel safe in the dark again. When I was 25, I moved into what I thought was my dream neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a quiet suburban street with modest homes, mature oak trees, and the kind of peace you pay extra for without realizing it. I worked as a junior accountant, stretched my budget too thin for the mortgage, but I didn't care. It was mine. My little piece of normal American life. I'm telling you this so you understand. There was nothing special about this place. Nothing that should have attracted what happened next. I've always been a night person. While my neighbors tucked themselves in by 10 p.m., I'd be wide awake, energized by the silence that settled over the streets like fresh snow. 3 or 4 times a week, I'd take my dog Charlie out for long walks, sometimes not returning until past midnight. Charlie was a 12-pound terrier mix, scrappy looking but gentle as they come. Quiet too, he barely ever barked, which I loved about him. We'd walk for miles together through those empty streets, just me, Charlie, and the street lights creating pools of amber light every 30 feet. The neighborhood layout was unusual. Each house sat on a large lot with significant gaps between properties, maybe 50 or 60 feet of unmowed grass and wild shrubs separating one home from the next. During the day, you'd see kids cutting through these spaces as shortcuts. At night, though, they became voids. Pure darkness that the porch lights couldn't penetrate. It was a Thursday in late October when everything changed. I remember because I'd just gotten paid and felt unusually good about life. Charlie and I had been walking for about 40 minutes, taking our usual route through the winding streets, when I stopped to check my phone. That's when I heard it, a giggle, soft, almost childlike, coming from one of those dark gaps between houses across the street. I looked up, saw nothing but blackness. Then it came again, a little louder this time. Definitely a female voice. It had this quality to it that I can't quite describe, playful but wrong somehow, like hearing a music box in an abandoned building. "Hello?" I called out, immediately feeling stupid for doing so. The giggling stopped. Charlie was staring into the darkness too, ears forward but not alarmed. Just curious and I stood there for maybe 20 seconds, phone light pointed toward the gap, but I couldn't see anyone. The darkness seemed almost solid, like it was pushing back against the light. "Probably just some teenagers messing around," I muttered to Charlie, tugging his leash gently. We kept walking, and I forced myself to laugh it off. Kids do weird things. Maybe it was a dare or some TikTok challenge. Within 10 minutes, I'd almost forgotten about it. Our route formed a large loop, and about 35 minutes later, we approached that same street from the opposite direction. I wasn't thinking about the giggling anymore. I was thinking about the leftover pizza waiting for me at home. As we passed the gap where I'd heard the sound, I glanced over instinctively. Nothing. No sound, no movement. See? Just kids being weird. 20 minutes later, Charlie and I arrived home. I was exhausted. It was nearly 1:30 a.m. I didn't bother with lights. I knew my house well enough to navigate in the dark, and honestly, I liked the shadows. They felt cozy, like a blanket. I headed straight upstairs with Charlie, took a quick shower, and collapsed into bed. Charlie burrowed under the covers like always, his warm little body settling against my leg. But I couldn't fall asleep. It wasn't the giggling bothering me. I'd genuinely forgotten about it again. I just felt off. You know that feeling when your body knows something your mind hasn't figured out yet? That animal instinct that makes your skin prickle for no obvious reason? I kept opening my eyes, scanning the dark room, then closing them again. This went on for maybe 30 minutes. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. I don't know how long I slept. Could have been 20 minutes, could have been 2 hours. But I woke up suddenly, completely alert in that unnatural way that tells you something is wrong. Charlie wasn't under the covers anymore. I rolled over and saw him sitting beside my bedroom door, completely still, head cocked at an odd angle, staring at the door like he was watching something through it. "Charlie," I whispered. "Buddy, what is it?" He didn't even glance at me. His ears were perked forward in total concentration. Then he stood, walked to my bedside, turned around, and sat again, still facing the door. My heart started hammering. That's when I heard it. That same giggling. Muffled, distant, but unmistakable. The same playful, wrong sound from earlier. My first thought. She followed us home. "She's outside." I got out of bed as quietly as possible, told Charlie to stay, and crept out of my bedroom, closing the door behind me to keep him safe. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind as I descended the stairs, each step seeming to echo like a gunshot in the silence. I reached the front door and looked through the peephole. Empty. Nothing on the porch but a moth circling the light fixture. I stared for a solid minute, certain I'd heard the sound coming from outside. Then the giggling came again, clearer now, louder, not muffled by a door. Because she wasn't outside, I turned around slowly, and that's when I saw her. In my living room, sitting on my couch in the darkness, was the silhouette of a woman. I could just make out her shape against the slightly lighter darkness of the window behind her. She was facing me directly, and she was smiling. I could see her teeth. She giggled again, and the sound seemed to fill the entire house. I don't remember running up the stairs. My body just moved, pure survival instinct taking over. I grabbed Charlie from my room, locked us in the master bathroom, and called 911 with shaking hands. "There's someone in my house," I whispered to the dispatcher. "A woman. She's sitting in my living room." The operator kept me on the line, but I couldn't hear anything from downstairs. No footsteps, no creaking, no giggling, just silence. Somehow that was worse. Police arrived 8 minutes later, the longest 8 minutes of my life. They found her 3 blocks away, walking barefoot down the middle of the street in nothing but a nightgown, despite the near-freezing temperature. She was 43 years old, lived 45 miles away, had been missing for 3 weeks. Here's the part that still makes my blood run cold. She had broken in through my back window, a window she'd shattered with a rock. There's no way I wouldn't have heard that if I'd been home, which means she broke in while Charlie and I were still out on our walk. She'd been in my house for over an hour before I came home, sitting in the dark, waiting, watching me walk past her and go upstairs. The police said she had severe mental health issues. Her family claimed she must have been in some kind of fugue state, that she didn't know what she was doing. But here's what keeps me up at night. She recognized me outside, in that gap between houses, hours before she broke in. She was already watching me then, which means she knew my routine, knew when I walked, knew where I lived. How long had she been watching? That was 6 years ago. She was eventually released to a care facility. I moved out of that house within a month. And last week I saw her name in the news. She's been reported missing again, for 10 days now. And 2 nights ago, I heard giggling outside my new apartment. I'm writing this from a motel room 2,000 miles away from where I used to live. Every door is locked, every window is checked 3 times. There's a chair wedged under the door handle, and I still haven't slept through the night in 4 months. Because I know what it feels like to wake up and realize someone has been watching you sleep. And worse, I know they can get in whenever they want. This started 5 months ago, and I need to tell someone before I lose my mind completely. I lived in what most people would call an ideal situation. A small 2-bedroom house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a peaceful town where people still waved at their neighbors. I worked remotely as a graphic designer, which meant my little home office saw more of me than anywhere else. Living alone never bothered me. I actually preferred it. No roommate drama, no compromises on thermostat settings, no one eating my leftovers. Just me, my work, and the kind of silence most people pay premium rent for. My bedroom was simple. Queen-size bed facing the door, nightstand with a lamp and alarm clock, and a door that I religiously closed and locked every single night before bed. That detail is important. Remember it. It was a Tuesday night in early November when it first happened. Nothing felt wrong. I'd worked until about 8 p.m., made myself dinner, watched half a documentary about ocean life, and went to bed around 10:30. I fell asleep normally. No bad dreams, no tossing and turning. Then my eyes snapped open. The clock read 1:52 a.m. I didn't wake up naturally. It felt forced, like my subconscious had yanked me out of sleep because something was desperately wrong. You know that feeling when your body knows danger before your brain catches up? That electric shot of adrenaline that makes your skin feel too tight? That's what I felt. I lay there disoriented and groggy, trying to figure out what had triggered this sudden awakening. No sounds, no movement. Just an overwhelming sense of wrongness. Then I saw it. My bedroom door, the one I absolutely, without question, had locked before bed, was open. Not wide open, but cracked about 4 inches, creating a wedge of darkness that seemed to stare back at me like an eye. The fear that gripped me in that moment is hard to put into words. It wasn't the jump scare kind of fear from horror movies. It was slow, creeping, suffocating dread that made every muscle in my body tense. I lived alone. I always locked that door. So why was it open? I sat up slowly, barely breathing, listening for any sound. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of the house settling. Sounds I'd heard 1,000 times before, but now seemed sinister. Moving as quietly as possible, I got out of bed and approached the door. Every step felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff. I kept the lights off, some instinct telling me not to announce my awareness, and gently pushed the door open wider. The hallway stretched out before me, dark and still. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 2 minutes, straining my ears for footsteps, breathing, anything. When nothing came, I forced myself to check the entire house, every room, every closet, even the basement I rarely went into. Nothing was out of place, no broken windows, no picked locks, no signs of entry at all. I went back to my bedroom and examined the door itself, trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Maybe I hadn't closed it properly. Maybe there was something wrong with the lock mechanism. Maybe the house had settled in some weird way that popped it open. None of those explanations felt right, but what was the alternative? I eventually got back into bed, checked the door 3 times to make sure it was truly closed, and tried to sleep. I don't think I managed more than an hour or two. The next day, I almost convinced myself it was nothing. I worked, ate, watched TV, followed my normal routine. By the time I went to bed that night, I'd rationalized it away as my own forgetfulness. I locked the door, double-checked it, and went to sleep around 10 p.m. At 2:14 a.m., I woke up the same way. Suddenly, forcefully, heart already racing. The door was open again. This time I knew I hadn't forgotten. I knew something was wrong. But when I searched the house again, there was nothing. No evidence. No explanation. This became my life for the next 3 weeks. Not every night. That's what made it worse. If it happened consistently, I could prepare, could find a pattern. But it was random. 3 times 1 week, then nothing for 5 days, then 2 nights in a row. Always between 1:30 and 2:30 a.m. Always waking up to find that door open. I called the police non-emergency line after the 6th time. I felt ridiculous explaining it. "Officer, my door keeps opening by itself," but they sent someone out. A young cop who clearly thought I was paranoid walked through my house, checked the locks, and basically told me to get better sleep. The paranoia started eating at me. I'd lie in bed, eyes wide open, watching the door, daring it to move. But on those nights, nothing happened. It was only when I actually fell asleep that I'd wake to find it open. I was becoming a wreck. Work suffered. I'd catch myself staring at nothing, running on 3 hours of sleep, jumping at every sound. Finally, I made a decision. I ordered a security camera online. Nothing fancy, just a basic model that I could set up on my nightstand aimed at the door. If something was happening, I'd have proof. The camera arrived on a Thursday. I set it up that evening, testing it multiple times to make sure it worked. The red recording light blinked steadily as I locked the door, triple-checking this time, and climbed into bed. I woke at 1:58 a.m. Before I even looked at the door, I knew it was open. I could feel the air circulation, the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. But this time I didn't investigate. I grabbed the camera's SD card with shaking hands and rushed to my office, jamming it into my laptop. I scrolled backward through the footage, 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. The door remained closed and locked. Then, at 1:56 a.m., just 2 minutes before I woke, I heard it on the recording, click. The lock disengaged, not broken, not forced, just unlocked, like someone had used a key. The door swung open slowly, smoothly, deliberately. For about 20 seconds, there was nothing but darkness in the doorway. Then he stepped into frame. A man. Tall, maybe 6'2" and thin, wearing dark clothes that made him almost invisible in the low light. But what made my blood turn to ice was how he moved, slowly, carefully. Each footstep placed with surgical precision, making absolutely no sound. He walked straight to my bed, straight to where I was sleeping, completely unaware, and he just stood there, inches from my face, looking down at me. I watched myself sleep, watched my chest rise and fall, completely vulnerable, while this stranger loomed over me. He stood there for 43 seconds. I know because I counted every single one while watching the footage. Then, just as slowly and silently as he'd entered, he backed away and left the room. 18 seconds after he disappeared from the frame, I saw myself stir and wake up. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This had just happened, minutes ago, which meant he might still be in the house. I didn't think. I just ran back to my bedroom, locked the door, and called 911. My voice was shaking so badly the dispatcher asked 3 times if I was hurt. The police came. They searched everywhere. Attic, basement, every closet, every possible hiding place. They found nothing. Not a fingerprint, not a hair, nothing. Whoever this person was, they were a professional. The detective assigned to my case said the man had probably been picking my locks, which explained the clean entry. The video was too dark and grainy to identify him. He never looked at the camera, never showed his full face. They had no suspects, no leads. Just footage of a stranger who'd been watching me sleep, and who'd probably been doing it for 3 weeks before I even knew. I stayed in hotels for a month while they investigated. When nothing turned up, I made my decision. I packed everything I owned, broke my lease, and moved 2,000 miles away to a city I'd never been to before. That was 6 weeks ago. I'm starting to feel safe again, starting to sleep for more than a few hours at a time. But 3 nights ago, I woke up at 2:07 a.m. I don't have a bedroom door here, just a privacy curtain I hung up because the apartment is a studio. It was pulled open about 4 inches, and I live on the 9th floor. The night I almost didn't make it home. The night I learned that the most dangerous place isn't a dark alley in the city. It's an empty rest stop on a highway where no one can hear you scream. What happened changed everything I thought I knew about road trips, about trusting my instincts, and about how close death can be while you're just trying to get some sleep in your car. This was 3 months ago, and I still can't drive at night. It was mid-October, and I was driving back from visiting college friends in Portland, about a 7-hour trip back to my apartment in Sacramento. The drive up had been fine, fueled by excitement and decent playlists, but the return trip felt endless. I'd left later than planned, around 6 p.m., thinking I could power through and be home by 1 a.m. But I didn't account for how exhausted I already was. My friends and I had stayed up until 4 a.m. the night before, and I'd only managed about 3 hours of sleep before hitting the road. By 11 p.m., I was fighting to keep my eyes open. You know that dangerous zone where you're aware you shouldn't be driving but convince yourself you're fine? That's where I was. Windows down, music loud, slapping my face at red lights. The highway was practically deserted. I'd see maybe one car every 10 minutes, their taillights disappearing into the darkness like dying stars. It was just me, the dotted yellow lines, and the hypnotic hum of my tires on asphalt. Around 12:45 a.m., I glanced at my GPS and my stomach dropped. I'd missed my exit, not by a mile or two, by 15 miles. I have no memory of passing it. Highway hypnosis, exhaustion, or both, but I'd been on autopilot and completely zoned out. According to my GPS, the next exit where I could turn around was another 12 miles ahead. I'd just added nearly 45 minutes to my trip. Damn it, I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. My eyes were burning. My neck ached. Every part of my body was screaming for rest. That's when I saw the sign, rest area 3 miles. It felt like a sign from the universe. I was clearly too tired to drive safely. I'd just proven that by missing a major exit. The smart thing, the responsible thing, was to pull over and sleep for a few hours. I took the exit. The rest stop was small, just a single-story brick building with restrooms, vending machines, and a couple of picnic tables outside. The parking lot could fit maybe 20 cars. It was completely empty. Not a single vehicle. Just me pulling into a spot under one of those harsh fluorescent lights that turn everything a sickly yellow-white. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the tick of the cooling motor. The silence was profound. No traffic sounds, no voices, nothing but the faint hum of the light above me and crickets in the surrounding darkness. I didn't have blankets or window covers, and my car's back seats were full of luggage, so I couldn't lie down properly. But I was beyond caring. I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, pulled my hoodie over my face to block the light, and closed my eyes. The position wasn't comfortable, but exhaustion is a powerful sedative. I could feel myself starting to drift almost immediately, that pleasant, heavy feeling spreading through my limbs. Then I heard it, a cough, quiet, muffled, but distinctly human. I yanked the hoodie off my face and sat up so fast I got dizzy. My heart was already hammering. I looked around frantically. The parking lot was still empty. No cars had pulled in. The rest stop buildings sat dark and silent about 50 feet away. But I knew what I'd heard. That was a cough. Someone clearing their throat. Where the hell were they? I scanned the area systematically. Left side of the parking lot, right side, behind me, the picnic tables, the building entrance. Nothing. No movement, no person. But there were no other cars. How could someone be here without a vehicle? We were in the middle of nowhere, at least 5 miles from the nearest town. I sat there for a full 5 minutes, windows up, doors locked, just watching. When nothing happened, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe I was so tired I'd hallucinated it. Maybe there was a homeless person camping in the woods nearby. None of those explanations felt right, but what else could it be? I reclined the seat again, but this time I didn't put the hoodie over my face. I kept my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, every nerve on high alert. My body was exhausted, but my brain refused to let me sleep. That primitive part of your mind that kept our ancestors alive was screaming that something was wrong. An hour crawled by. I checked my phone constantly. 1:47 a.m., 1:52 a.m., 2:03 a.m. Each minute felt like 10. Then, at exactly 2:18 a.m., I heard it again. The cough. Closer this time. I shot upright and looked toward the rest stop building. For just a second, maybe half a second, I saw movement in one of the windows. A shadow passing by inside. Someone was in there. My hand started shaking. This wasn't my imagination. Someone was definitely here, had been here the whole time, hiding in that building in the middle of the night with no car and no lights on. Why? I stared at the building for the next 20 minutes without blinking. Whoever was inside never appeared at the windows again. No lights turned on, no doors opened. The complete lack of activity should have been reassuring, but it had the opposite effect. Because people don't just hang out in dark rest stop bathrooms at 2 a.m. for fun. Slowly, despite the fear, exhaustion started winning. My eyelids grew heavy, my thoughts became fuzzy. I told myself I was overreacting. If someone was in there, they were probably just a traveler like me, trying to rest, maybe homeless and looking for shelter. They weren't a threat. I was safe in my locked car. I let my eyes close, still facing the building, still semi-alert, and I fell asleep. I don't know how long I was out, 20 minutes maybe, 30 at most. When I opened my eyes, he was there, a man, standing directly outside my driver's side window, his face inches from the glass, staring at me. His eyes were bloodshot and wide, his face gaunt, and he wore a stained jacket that looked like he'd been living in it for months. But what terrified me most was his expression, not angry, not surprised that I'd woken up, just patient, like he'd been standing there a while, waiting. Pure instinct took over. I jammed my key in the ignition and turned it, the engine roaring to life. I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas. Thump, hiss. The car lurched as both rear tires ran over something, and immediately I heard the terrible sound of air escaping. In my rearview mirror, I glimpsed what I'd hit, a strip of nails deliberately placed behind my tires. He'd planned this, set a trap while I slept. The man was already moving, running toward my car with alarming speed. Time seemed to slow down. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a choice. Stay in the car and wait for him to break the window? Try to drive on flat tires and potentially destroy my car completely, stranding myself here, or fight. Some part of me, the part that refuses to be a victim, made the decision. I kicked my door open just as he reached it. The door slammed into him, but he recovered quickly. We collided, and I felt us both hit the pavement hard. I'm not a fighter. I'm 5'8" and barely made it through high school gym class. But fear is an incredible motivator. I swung wildly, connecting with his face, his ribs, anything I could reach. He fought back, but he was clearly surprised. He'd expected an easy victim, someone who would freeze or beg. He got neither. I don't know how long we struggled. Probably less than a minute, though it felt like hours. But I got the advantage, pinning him long enough to grab my phone from the car and dial 911. Highway 101, northbound rest area mile marker 47. I gasped into the phone. I need police now. Someone attacked me. The nearest highway patrol was 23 minutes away. I kept him there, my knee on his back, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. When the officer arrived, the man started screaming, admitted everything, said I wasn't going to be his first, that he'd been working this rest stop for 8 months. They found a bag in the building. I don't know everything that was in it, but the officer's face when he looked inside told me enough. I drove home on temporary spare tires as the sun came up, and I haven't stopped for rest since. Because I know now what waits in those empty parking lots, and I know how close I came to never leaving. The detective called me last week. They've connected him to 4 other disappearances along that highway, all people traveling alone, all last seen at rest stops.